Hi guys. My video for today is people that I remember from my childhood, and one of the reasons I remember these people is because of their names. It's not because they were kin to us or anything like that, or we hung around them every day, or it was just people my mom and dad knew and that I remember as a kid. I mean, we did stop and visit them and stuff. First off, I want to talk about how America's doing right now. And you have to realize I live in basically a rural community where it's a very small town, and all the little towns all the way around. 80% of the people I know around here has come down with COVID. This is spreading like wildfire. So I'm asking everybody to be really careful about where you go, who you let in your house, whose house that you go to, the stores that you go in. Wear a mask, because if you guys remember, not too long ago I had to go for a test because I was around someone who had it. And then last Sunday someone showed up here and was here for a few minutes. Then the next day she tested positive for COVID. But why I hit it lucky is because she wore a mask the whole time she was here. But we're still being careful. Now she's down with it. Her husband's down with it. And then the couple of days after that, my sister and her grandkids showed up, so I had to warn them. Then I found out today, my second cousin, my cousin, just hundreds of them have come down with it in my area. So just be really careful, because you don't know where other people have been, and you're taking a big chance, so just be really careful. Anyway, now we're going to get on to people I knew in my past. In the 1960s and early 70s, we knew this family that lived right on the outskirts of Rogers, Arkansas, going out toward the lake, and they lived in a little old cabin that's set on the side of a hill. I mean, the hill was like, it went out and then just dropped down, and the cabin was built, the front part was built on the flat part, and the back was kind of built out and then had stilts holding it up. It reminded me of the old Loretta Lynn cabin, the old Dolly Parton type cabin way back. But it was built on a hill. I was always scared to go in there. I was always scared to death that house was going to fall over the hill. But we used to stop there a lot when we were kids. And it was a lady, and she had, I believe it was 5 kids. There was Fred, Noah, Enoch, Elizabeth, and there was another one. I'm sure there was another one, but I can't remember his name. But anyway, they had no electricity. They had no running water in the house. And I remember at 7, 8 years old walking in their house, and their living room, when you went in their living room, the only thing in their living room, they had a recliner sitting over in this corner, and there was a wood stove right in the middle of the room. And that's all I can ever remember being in that living room. Well, when you went in the kitchen, which you went over here and went in the kitchen, it was a long room, and it had like a sink and a cabinet built, but it was like just a cabinet top, and the legs were built out like 2x4s and had a sink in it, and they brought water in, and it was, of course, it was the 60s, and they lived out in the country. It wasn't against the law for them to live like that as long as the kids were taken care of. But anyway, her name was Vicella. Everyone called her Vi or Vicel. And I just remember that name, and I can't ever remember a husband being around. But I do remember another guy that hung out there, and my mom and dad seemed to know him very well. And the reason he stuck with me is because his name was Hambone Davis. And if that was his real name or not, I don't know, because I never, ever heard anybody call him anything but Hambone Davis. That was, my whole life, I knew this man for many years, and that's all he was ever called in front of me. And everybody I knew only knew him as Hambone Davis. And another guy, a real character, that used to hang around all the time, and my mom and dad would visit him. He wore the blue Oxford coveralls, and this was in the 60s and 70s. And he wore an old blue Oxford, like a conductor's type hat. And he smoked a pipe all the time. You never saw this man without his pipe. I swear that he even went to the bathroom with this pipe, I believe. Anyway, I only ever knew this man as Toots. They called him Toots Stover. But I don't know if Toots was his real name or if he got the name Toots because of the pipe that he smoked. I don't know, but I always just thought it was funny. But I remember this man really well because I remember constantly watching him turn that pipe sideways and light it. And as a kid, I didn't know what he was doing. I really didn't even know what smoking a pipe was. My mother didn't smoke, and my dad smoked, but he smoked roll your own cigarettes. My dad he never hardly ever bought packs of cigarettes. He rolled his own, and but my mom never smoked. But I never seen anybody smoke a pipe. And growing up, I remember most of the women that I knew as a child dipped snuff. They chewed tobacco. My aunt and uncle, they had the first set of triplets in Rogers, Arkansas. They were the first set of triplets ever born in Rogers. And as they grew up, there was 2 girls and 1 boy, John, Joan, and Jane. I'm not going to give any last names. But when the girls were teenagers, young girls, before they was even teenagers, up to teenagers, they chewed snuff. The girls actually chewed snuff. They had a sister that dipped, and that sister, she's off from it now, and she smokes cigarettes. And the 2 twin girls, I believe that they got completely off from it when they started getting interested in boys. And then another guy that I remember, and this was in the late 60s and early 70s, we had this old man that used to come around. He raised a garden every year, a big garden. And he came around and he would sell vegetables. He went house to house and sold vegetables off the back of his truck. He didn't park in one area and you went to him. He came to you. And everybody always looked for him to come by. And they called him Groundhog. And the reason they called him that is because if he was driving down the roads or the streets in the town, back then it was full of groundhogs because it was a rural community back then. There was 8,000 people in that town back then. Now there's 67,000. But anyway, he would stop and pick up all the groundhogs that trucks and stuff had run over and killed, and they just left them in the road. He'd stop and clean them up and get rid of them. And that's how he got the nickname Groundhog. And then I remember now, my aunt, my dad's sister, married into this family, and this is how I got to know these people. But the grandmother's name was Nora Bell. And then they had a daughter which was married to my dad's uncle, and her name was Toady Bell. And then they had a daughter, and they named her Cupie. I know, really strange names, but that's what it was. And then I had an aunt. Her name was Vina, and through our whole life we called her Viney. And that was her real name, was Vina. But, we called her Viney. And another thing I was thinking about, I had an uncle, he just passed away not too long ago. He was married so many times that, that was my mom's brother, and his last marriage, he had married my dad's sister. And I was sitting down one day and writing down his ex-wives and girlfriends' names and stuff, He died at the age of 86 years old. He almost made it to 87 when he passed. And his first wife's name, now get this, his first wife's name was Goldie. And his second wife's name, well, I don't know if they were married or not, but I remember her very well. Her name was Cookie. And then he was with a lady, or married to her. Her name was Queely. And then he married my dad's sister, which her name was Alberta, but everybody called her Birdie. And then when they broke up, I think she'd been married like 8 or 9 times. And then whenever they broke up, he started dating a woman named Minnie. And then after they broke up, of course, he went back to Birdie. But I was thinking about their names, and if you think about this, Goldie, Cookie, Queely, Birdie, Minnie. And I'm thinking, and they were all little short women, small, very small women. And he was like 6'2", big guy. And I thought, did he pick these women because they were so little, or it was really strange. Another one I want to talk about is in the late 70s, very early 80s, my dad's mother, Grandma White, she lived out in the edge of the country, and she rented from this old man. There was a church that sat here, and beside the church there was a little white house, and she lived in that. And then you kind of went down the hill a little bit, and he lived down here, the guy that owned that house, and he had little cabins down below. And he got a name, they called him Nosy Woods. His last name was Woods. I never knew his first name ever. But the reason they called him that is because he knew everybody that lived in his places. He knew everybody that came, went, how long they were there, man, woman, how many children they had. He knew it all. As soon as somebody came to visit somebody that lived in one of his places, he was out there sitting in the yard watching every move. And so he got the name Nosy Woods. And we used to go over there, when we'd go over there and I'd knock on the door and Grandma wouldn't be there. And I'd go out, look around, because she couldn't drive or anything. She was in her 80s, I believe, late 70s, early 80s. And I'd go walk around the house and holler at her, and here she'd come out of his house walking up the hill, and I'd say, "Grandma, what was you doing down there alone with that old man?" And she'd just smile real big and giggle, and you know, I'd tease her a little bit, and she never would deny it or anything like that, or say yes or no. But yeah, I had fun teasing her about it. Just made her smile and giggle like a little schoolgirl. Anyway, Nosy Woods, I know it's funny saying it. He also had another nickname they called him Radar. And the reason they called him Radar is because he would not eat a fried egg, because when you cracked it and you put it in a skillet, you know how eggs pop, and it's because of the water content in the egg. He would not eat it. He swore up and down that egg pops in the skillet because it was full of radar. And he flat refused to eat chicken eggs, or well, any kind of eggs that popped in the skillet when you cooked them, because he swore they were full of radar. So he had the nickname Radar. But and you know, the bad thing is I remember people actually calling him Nosy Woods to his face, and he just, like it was his real name, he just went on, "Hey, Nosy Woods," and he just waved and you just go on. But when he passed away, they just found all kinds of books in his house. Every one of those books, pages stuffed with $20 bills and stuff, all in that. And his son took over the place, and he ended up drinking himself to death, and I don't know whatever happened to the property. I don't remember what happened to him. But I always got a big giggle out of teasing Grandma about being down there with that old man by herself. And she was 80-some years old, and she was off going down visiting them old men. And my grandmother never wore pants. She always wore the long dresses, like they did back then. And but you have to remember, I came from a old country town. In the 60s and 70s, it was nothing but hillbillies back then. So I came from a line of hillbillies, and I'm not ashamed of it. But, and our town was considered a rural town, even with 8,000 people. And now today it's a big metropolitan area, and now it has 67,000 people in it. And it's just hard to believe looking at it today. But anyway, these were just names and stuff that I remembered from when I was a kid. I mean, Hambone Davis. Can you imagine going through life with a name like Hambone? I'm sure that he probably had another name. It's just I didn't know him by any other name. And that's like growing up. My sisters had friends with weird names, like Penrod. It just makes you wonder how some of these people get those names, or, back in the 60s and 70s, where I come from, it was all country people. I mean, they were like Loretta Lynn, Dolly Parton, mountain country. These were country people. And, but we lived better. Personally, I think we had a better life back then. But I'll always remember that little old cabin sitting on that hillside, because when you walked out on that back deck, I would get scared to death right away, because it just felt like, because when you went out on the back deck from the kitchen, you went out the back door in the kitchen, you went out on this little deck, and it was just like a drop off. There was no yard, nothing. It was just like straight down. And I always felt like when I was out there, I could feel the cabin sliding. And I would get the heck out of there, because I was scared to death that cabin was going to go over that hill. I mean, it was scary. And the last time I saw Toots Stover, he lived in his, I don't know if one of them was his, I think they were kin but not a child. But they bought a house out in the country, and he moved into an old school bus. He parked the school bus in the side yard, and he lived in that. And they owned a home in town, and they rented it out and bought a house way out in the country, which was an old cabin, and moved in it. And the house they had in town was really nice. But they'd rather live in the old cabin than they would in the nice house in town. So that's where they lived. But, and it just, think about how many of you remember people from your past or your childhood because of their names. Not because they were kin to you, not because they did anything special for you or anything. It was all because of their name. And, some of these people like Bicel, Toots Stover, Nora Bell, Toady Bell, all them, I can picture them, what they look like. And then there's some like Hambone Davis, I can't really remember. I know he was an older man and wore an old straw hat, but I can't really remember what he looked like. And Goldie, I think she had passed before I was born. I remember Cookie very well. And Queely, I barely remember her. I know she was a little bitty woman. She dipped snuff. Birdie, I remember her because that is my dad's sister. So I remember her. And Minnie, she was weaved into the family somehow, and she was married to one of the guys in the family, if I remember right. I don't know. Or maybe she was a kid from my mom and dad's teenage years, and they grew up knowing her and the family and stuff, and we got to know their kids when their kids were born and all that. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this, because let me tell you, I enjoyed going back and remembering these people. And, and I have great respect for them, because think about what they had to go through with some of the names like this. But they were brave, they were strong, and maybe they didn't even think about it. Maybe it just wasn't that big a deal to them. But I think I probably would have been, but it's like Rusty. Rusty is a nickname. When I was born and my mom saw that I had red hair, she said right then, we're going to nickname him Rusty because I don't want people calling him Red. Because my dad's name was Red. You know, well, his real name was Walter, but he had red hair as a child, and they started calling him Red, and Red Brown stuck with him his whole life. So my mom nicknamed me Rusty when I was born so people would not call me Red. So that's how I got that name. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I certainly did. To me, it was a trip back in time, and I enjoyed it. And please, be aware and be careful. This thing is far from over, and we do not want to lose you.